I know a lot of times there is this idea that you don't want to make something until you have an audience to sell it. And I'm a big fan of that. And there are just some things that that the audience will come. And it can
Mhm.
be also nice instead of always trying to kind of frantically scramble to meet the needs of your audience to be prepared. And so this was a course that I created where I was like, yeah, I'm still in audience building phases where I'm going to launch this thing and I don't expect tens of twenties of hundreds of people to buy it right away. But I do
Mhm.
know that it will continue to be useful as I grow my audience as a great lead in and introduction to my work. My experience with this course has been the most sales have come from people who are not ready for my more in depth services, but then I'll be like, "Okay, yeah, no problem. In the meantime, I do have this contracts foundations course if you're interested," and they will often buy it.
Hey everyone, welcome to Your First Digital Product, a show that helps maxed out service providers create their first digital product so they can gain an additional income stream, grow their impact without increasing one on one work, and experience more time freedom. On the show, I talk to business owners who have launched digital products and dig deep into how you can create, launch, and market your first digital product. I'm your host, Renee Morozowicz. Let's go. Hey everybody, today I'm here with Brionna Ned, and Brionna is the everyday lawyer focused on teaching freelancers and solopreneurs the foundations of business law so they can make better and more confident decisions in their work. Hey, how are you?
Hey there. I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. I'm excited to hear about your products. But why don't you tell everybody a little bit about you first?
Sure. Yeah. So as you said, I'm the everyday lawyer, and my focus or my mission is really to bring universal legalese fluency to the masses. I have been an entrepreneur now for, I don't know, maybe the past 5 or 6-ish years. I started out with a corporate well-being company that turned into a guidance or coaching business for a little while, and as I got more and more involved into the world of entrepreneurship, something that I encountered a lot was fellow entrepreneurs reaching out to me in a panic because some sort of business deal had gone sideways, or they were nervous because something about a business deal they had wasn't, going exactly right. And they didn't know how to communicate it without things sort of blowing up. And so I became, in my own community of entrepreneurs, this resource because I had a background in corporate law, working at big law firms, and then later as in house counsel. I became this resource for people to, review and translate contracts, look at small kind of business issues that come up in the everyday life of an entrepreneur. And so I got the idea to launch the Everyday Lawyer after I got yet another one of these reach outs from a friend who was nearly in tears, very worried about breaking a potential contract and losing, their house, their home, their dog, their kids kind of thing, that kind of
Yeah.
panic that the law can set in for a lot of people. And to me, what I started to see was there was really a knowledge access problem, because accessing knowledge to how the law works, how to understand it, and how to essentially navigate it and make it work for you is, there's a high cost of entry, quite literally, because lawyers are expensive and the other avenue, law school, is also expensive. There's a lot of knowledge behind a very large paywall that the average entrepreneur cannot afford. And then the second issue is legal jargon, actually taking the time to kind of break down what all of that legalese really means is another access issue, right? Because legal stuff is never just written in plain language. It's written in these heretofore, henceforth, blah, 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 clauses that are just grammatically incorrect and nonsensical. So I really am on a mission to change all that and make the law just more accessible, more friendly to people so that when they encounter a legal issue in their work, they don't feel so like intimidated by it, if that makes sense. Can
Yeah.
actually make more confident decisions around, the legal issues in their work, which I think ultimately helps you create a more like sustainable and successful business. So that's what I'm doing in a nutshell.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great because yeah, that legal stuff is really scary because you don't know what it says, so you're not sure if you're following what it says or not, and then yeah, God forbid like something come up and somebody ask you about your contract or they have a contract and you like, yes, I'm 100% with you. I don't get it. It's scary for entrepreneurs. So it's good. It's good that you have identified this in people and you do have a course
Mhm.
about the law. However, that's not your first product. So we'll get to that. But do you want to tell us about your first product and what it was and
Yes,
who it was for?
sure.
Yeah.
So I had co-founded a corporate well-being company that was all about helping to manage chronic stress in the workplace, because chronic stress is like the root of burnout, and it's also the number one cause of like the top 10 fatal diseases in the world. And
Well,
so we got set up this really ambitious goal to like, what does it look like to actually eradicate chronic stress? And what does it look like to attack that issue like inside of the workplace? And so we created like essentially a drip kind of stress education course where it was like an email went out once every week for 7-ish weeks. And it would include a video, and then it would include a worksheet to work through where you like actually learned about the science of stress and learned how to identify like where stress is showing up in your life and like kind of what to do about it. It was essentially like a beginner's course on stress management for people who work, just to essentially like wake them up to what was happening sort of in the background programming in their like everyday life.
that's very interesting that you say wake them up to it because, yeah, I think that people don't always even know that, the cause of, what's happening is actually from that. That's actually chronic stress. So, like, that is super interesting to me. So, who who was it for? Like, did you sell it to corporations? Did you sell it to individual people? Like,
Yeah, we
I guess
sold
how
it.
did it go?
It
You created it.
Yeah, we sold it to corporations. So oftentimes we would sell it to teams. The way we originally did it was a series of live workshops. And then we started to digitize it and turn it into more of a course. So very short form videos, no more than 15 minutes of video content per week, with like a worksheet grouped with it that you could like go through the activity and identify the areas that we talked about for yourselves. And then we would have, at the end of the 7 weeks, we would have a break week in the middle to kind of touch base, see where people were, what they had learned, what adjustments that they wanted to make. And then we would have essentially like a closeout at the end, where we would facilitate a conversation on like, okay, now that you know these things about yourself and what you've shared with your teammates, what are potentially some shifts that you could make as a team? And we essentially use that course as an in for pitching like a larger consulting contract with that team or company. So it would be the lead in, and then we would like pitch our consulting services on like people management and HR related things.
Yeah, I love that. I love 2 things specifically about that last part where the product was a lead into a service. So I think that's a great, positioning for digital products. And the other one was that you ran it as live workshops first. Did you get feedback then on exactly what to put into the email course
Mhm.
because you did it live? Like that yeah, do you wanna talk about that at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the way I've always approached digital products, because I've had more since then, when I had my own like coaching practice, I always approach them as like live workshops first, because they're a
Nice.
great testing ground. You can learn a lot of information really quickly. Because you're facilitating, you can see in real time what resonates with people. And, it's not like you have to do it a bunch of times. You can do a live
Mhm.
workshop 2, maybe 3 times and have a pretty good idea of like what a digitized course needs to include and what it can leave out. And it also, and we can talk about this later with the legal course, the contracts course I created. It also creates ideas for like, okay, if you wanted to supplement a course for people who have taken it and like offer little supplement offerings here and there, live workshops give you a really good idea of like, okay, what's the meat and bones of the digital course? And then maybe where ideas where I can like supplement things on later.
Yeah, because you can always explain more, but going into it saying like, here's everything you ever need to know about stress, like probably is stressful and
Exactly.
overwhelming.
Yeah.
So, like I like that. Here's really what you need, but then we can get into other things, as needed. They could be additional products, they could be bonuses, they could be any number of things, to be able to offer people more if you wanted to, but it doesn't have to be included in that main or first offering.
Hmm.
I love that. I love also that you said about the videos being under 15 minutes, and not that that's like a hard and fast rule. Like, don't take away from this podcast. Like, hey, Renee said if I have videos, they have to be under 15 minutes. No, I just like the idea that the information doesn't just go on forever. Because you have a time frame that you set for yourself, you're forced to get the most important information in there without overwhelming people, by going on and on. So I like that. And I also like that you have the worksheets too and the email. Like it all kind of goes together. I was just talking with a friend today about how people take in information, and some people are really verbal and some people are not. Like they need written information. So whenever you're creating something to educate someone, having different forms of information, because you don't know from one person to the next in your audience what, how they're best going to consume that. So I love all that.
Hmm. Yeah.
Nice.
I think it makes a huge difference. Like some people will just like totally get the visual, but other people need to
Hmm.
be kind of walked through the process step by step. And
Hmm.
so being able to essentially like meet people where they are, I think makes like a very strong, it just makes a really strong and effective digital product. It doesn't have to be
Hmm.
like some digital products. I still have courses that are like that I bought that I'll revisit from time to time, but I've never finished because there's just so much material that you're just like, "Oh my god, I'm never gonna get through this." And what I
Hmm.
also notice about those is that, like, implementation is hard. And so,
Hmm.
I had a teacher who's a marketer, she's Australian, Danny Gardner, and she talks a lot about, like preaches this thing called tiny courses, um, and having, really effective, simplified, discerned down information is actually high value. And
Hmm.
so that's sort of where I learned that mentality and how I try to create digital products, especially if they're like self-led video courses of like, what's the way to like discern this down, make this as simple as possible, because that is high value.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Because we have the internet, we're not in an information drought.
Right.
Like we can go look anything up anytime. The hard part is sifting through it all.
Yes.
So if you create a course that's basically just the internet, that's just not going to be very easy.
You're right.
Um, I've had some people on the podcast talk about revisions to their products. And, I think sometimes we think about revisions to our product in like adding, like, oh, I'd love to add this module or whatever. But some people think about revisions in what can I take away from this product to get people to the destination faster, to get people to the solution faster. And I love that because that is so much more powerful. Like, yes, it's lovely that you want to offer me everything, but like that's too overwhelming for me. So if you offer something of value for a problem that's important to me and gets me there faster and actually gets me there, like that's, a fan for life. Like
Mhm.
that's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
So I love that. Awesome. So that's a great product. I love that. Do you want to talk about your current product or
Sure.
any products in between or you pick?
We can talk about the current one. Yeah. All the other
Awesome.
in between ones are no longer available. My current product is just a contracts foundations course. So it came out of the world of, what I started my business with. It's since expanded, right? But what I started with was just a flat rate contract review service because people didn't understand what was in the contracts that they were reviewing and like signing them anyway. And then when there was a problem, like they would get really scared because they didn't understand the contract. And so, and that to me, right, is like contracts can be so onerous and have a lot of like really scary language in it. And so that became like my focus. I was like, I'm just going to start with contracts because that is the like consistent thread I see across the field. So I had that service and I kept creating what I call like legal reference guide for contracts. People would submit a contract. I'd create essentially like a study guide to the contract. Like this means this. This is a
Yeah.
problem for
Love it.
you because here's how to navigate that problem. You could try negotiating it this way. You could try negotiating it this way, that way, blah, blah, blah. I did, I don't know, 10, 20 of those. And I was like, okay, now people are starting to ask me, do I have contract templates? And I don't love contract templates because like it's again, it's the same legal access issue where someone just like gives you a template and it's like you're good to go. But like if there's a template without an explanation to it, then like what is the point of the template? Um
Mhm.
and when I researched the template market, I found that there were a lot of lawyers selling what I found to be, like, shockingly high templates, um,
Okay.
without an explanation, right? Like, I spent a couple hours on the internet looking, and I really only found one resource where it was like there was a template with an explanation involved, and
Mhm.
everything else was just like, "Here you go. Good luck to you." And that's
Yeah.
where I got the idea to create a contracts foundations course that includes a template, a very basic like services agreement for any sort of small business owner. And I started with freelance writers and like marketers in mind because that's who was asking me constantly for a template for their services. And so I just created this contract foundations course to reorient people to what the purpose of contracts is, what you can expect to find in a typical business contract, and then introduce them section by section to their template contract. Like, here's the section, this is what it means. Here's this
Mhm.
section, this is what it means, and this is why it's included. And then I did a bonus section on like things that aren't in this contract that you might expect to see and why I didn't include them. So I teach like my philosophy around contracts is like they are not here to prevent something bad from happening. That is not the purpose of a contract. Contracts will never save you from a bad actor. Like that is why if you pay attention to anything at all in the law, there are always all of these like trade secret and like non-compete
Mhm.
litigation, non-solicitation, like lawsuits running amok, right? Because all of those like terms live in employment contracts. And what do people do? They break them anyway because they want to,
Mhm.
because they want to go do this job or they want to go start this company. And your little, like, very, like, chumped up and scary, like, non-compete or non-solicitation clause or confidentiality clause is not going to stop them from doing what they want to do. And so the first thing I do is try to reorient people's like brains around the purpose of a contract is to define a working relationship. It's never going to save
Okay.
you from something bad happening.
Well, I wish it did, but okay.
Right. But like, I think,
Yeah.
then when we get clear about that, it helps us get to the root cause of the problem. It's not the
Mhm.
contract, it's the person you're contracting with. And so often what
Mhm.
I encounter when people really find themselves, between a rock and a hard place in contracting is like they knew, they had a feeling, they
Mhm.
had an instinct about this person, they saw red flags, but because lawyers have done just such a bad job of telling people a contract will protect you from something bad happening, they'll be like, well, the contract will save me
Mm.
if this person
Mhm.
is in fact a bad actor. And the contract never saves you in if in
Wow.
fact the person is a bad actor. And this is a
Yeah.
really big hurdle for people to get over. So that's how I start. I'm like, that is my philosophy of contracts. We are here to define a working relationship. And so, what I am teaching you is how to define the relationship for things to go well. And
Hmm.
when you get to the point where you inevitably, one or both parties inevitably outgrow the contract, how can you go your separate ways without all the drama? Can we just go our separate
Hmm.
ways like pretty easily? So you're not going to find the scary language. You're not going to find the deterrent language. I have a whole separate, Google Doc with like example terms if that's what you decide you want to put in your contract, right? Like I'm not in control. I'm just giving you options. Um
Right.
and so I have a separate Google Doc where it's like you can go and see sample clauses of some of the more common terms that are in there that are there to quote unquote be deterrents. You're just not going to find it in the template that I have created for you. And so
Okay.
that's how the course works is I introduce you to the philosophy and then I take you through the template section by section and I tell you what's different about, the way that I write contracts versus the way maybe another lawyer might write a contract, which is that like
Mm.
I am trying to write this contract for the business deal to go well and the working relationship to be successful. I'm not writing it with, the something bad happening in mind.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and what I'm taking away from this, and maybe not the primary thing, but um, if there's a red flag, don't work with that person.
Yes, yes. So, my philosophy is like, it's actually your responsibility to vet the business deal and the person behind the business that you're going to,
Hmm.
work or collaborate with. It's not the contract's responsibility to handle it on the
Mm-hmm.
back end. And I think that's where
Yes.
we really mess up in business generally and why we
Hmm.
sometimes hear like these horror stories. So, that Contracts Foundations course is really meant to introduce people to this new potential philosophy and way to think about contracts that, to me anyway, immediately makes them less scary and makes the law
Hmm.
less scary to business owners, right? Like, we have to,
Right.
if I'm not able to make that shift for you, like, I am not really doing my job. So, that's also
Hmm.
what the Contracts Foundations course is about is shifting some of that fear into confidence and then building the confidence by teaching you like this is what this means. When you
Hmm.
encounter terms like this, maybe from larger corporations, like these are common terms that are not currently in your contract, but large corporations like them. Here's
Okay.
why they like them, here's why they like to include them in contracts, and here's what to do about them.
Okay.
So
Nice.
essentially it's like if there was an outline of the course, it would be like my philosophy on contracts, introduce you to the template that you can use and customize for your own company, and then teach you what each section of the template means, talk about things you might have expected to be in the contract that are like deterrent terms that I didn't put in there
Hmm.
and why, but where you can find examples if you want them. And then lastly, talk about terms that are common to see from larger corporations, why they like to include them, and how to negotiate them. And that's the
Okay. Like
course.
how to navigate.
Yeah.
Okay. Nice. Yeah, I like that. So I have a lot of questions. So what really is the I don't want to say like the pain point, but like what is the impetus for someone to purchase the course? Like so you have the audience identified and you kind of, you have it down with like, yeah, we all don't understand contracts. But like what is like as a service provider, what is the thing that happens or is happening or has happened to make one think like, "Oh, you know what? I'm going to buy this course. I really need this course." Like, does that make sense?
Yes, I think the single line that has, probably sold this course most to people is like, "We're not faking it till we make it with contracts." Like, we're just not
Mm,
doing it.
nice. Okay. Okay.
every time I
That's
say
your
it, people are like, "Ooh, I've been called out."
Yeah, right, exactly, like, "Ooh, not me."
Um,
Yes.
everyone kind of like gets caught, with their hands in the cookie jar on that one, and they're like, "Oh, shoot." And I'm like,
Mhm,
if you are faking it till you're making it to make it with
mhm,
contracts in your business, like I invite you to take this course and stop
mhm.
pretending like you know what you're signing. This is not
Right,
okay.
right, right.
Even if it
And
hasn't,
I
like,
think
come to bite you in the butt yet, I was like, it's
yes,
just not responsible as a business owner. You have
right.
got to know what you're signing. Like, officially, we're not doing this anymore.
Mhm. Yeah. And that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think as like business owners, especially this type of business owner, you start where you are, you do the best you can, that kind of thing, but as you're going along, like you should continue to get better.
Yes.
So, if you don't take this right away because maybe you weren't aware of it or whatever, like, at a certain point, like you should be doing this because yes, you should feel confident and you shouldn't just be like, "Oh, well, I have this contract that somebody gave me or, I bought or whatever, like, here it is, fingers crossed,
Yeah.
like, you should be learning more and doing business well, and I think that's part of doing business well.
Yeah, and if your business is service-based, you are dealing with contracts, like, full stop.
Mhm. Yes.
And the
Yes, you
the
should be, and if you're not,
Yes.
that's a different conversation,
Right,
yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
and so it's like that is the number one thing to me, like, if you're service-based, your business needs contracts, period,
Mhm.
and that
Yes.
means you need to have a basic understanding of what's in contracts and what they mean. That's it.
Mhm.
There's
Exactly.
nothing there's nothing kind of, like, super flashy about it. It's just
Mhm.
very practical. It's just a really practical fact, like, we are
Mhm.
not doing this anymore. It's not acceptable, and I have made this resource accessible. It's
Mhm.
$99. I frequently put it on sale, so you can often get it cheaper than that. So, yeah.
Yeah. Kinda feel that way about certain things, like, a will. You should just have a will.
Yeah.
Power of attorney, like, you should just have those documents. Just if you don't have them, just stop what you're doing and go get those documents, especially if you have dependents. Like, there's no excuse to just continue to wait for that kind of
That's
stuff.
right.
Like, just do it. So, like, it's like adulting,
Yeah.
right? This is adulting.
Yeah.
So, we're calling people out here who are
That's right.
listening.
It's like adulting in your business. This is
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yes, I love it. Okay, so other questions I have. So you had the idea, you're like, okay, people don't understand, they need a course. I'm gonna sit down and make a course. Like, did you have any problems? Did it take a long time? Was it just like, I know what I'm doing, I've done this before, I'm just gonna knock this out? Like, what can you tell us about the creation process, I guess?
so I had the benefit of having another organization approach me to create a contract course for them, a contract
Oh,
foundation
nice.
course for them. I was already thinking about creating one, but then we're like, we're gonna pay you to create one. Like, can you, scope it out and tell us costs? So, I did the whole like make a proposal and and send them costs, and then they ghosted the conversation. And I was like, well, I have this
Mhm.
course outline,
Nice.
and I was thinking about
Yeah.
doing this anyway because just I'm seeing that people really are struggling to like understand contract basics. And so I'm just going to make this thing. Um,
Mhm.
and I do want to say here for people that are listening, which is that I know a lot of times there is this idea that like you don't want to make something until you have an audience to sell it. And I'm a big fan of that. And there are just some things that that like the audience will come. And it can
Mhm.
be also nice instead of always trying to like kind of frantically scramble to meet the needs of your audience to be prepared. And so this was a course that I created where I was like, yeah, I'm still like in audience building phases where like I'm going to launch this thing and I don't expect like tens of 20s of hundreds of people to like buy it right away. But I do
Mhm.
know that it will continue to be useful as I like grow my audience as like a great lead in and introduction to my work, and also really valuable to people who are just trying to get a basic understanding of how contracts work. Um, so I
Yeah.
do think that there is something to also just like having something that you know for a fact people are going to need prepared, so that
Mhm.
a lot of I've had my experience with this course has been the most sales have come from people who are not ready for my more in-depth services, but then I'll be like, okay, yeah, no problem. In the meantime, like I do have this contracts foundations course if you're interested, and they will often buy
Yes, all the things. You could be the host of this podcast. This is every single thing I say every
it.
episode. Okay, let's see if we can go back through them. The audience thing is interesting. Yes, I often say like you have to have somebody to sell it to, but we kind of discount this concept of like SEO, where you have a solution to a problem that other people out there are searching for. You just may not know them.
Yes.
So yes, it can draw people in. So that is an excellent point. That people and your philosophy that like, and I just did an interview right before this. That's a huge thing. People are like, if I don't make X sales in X amount of time, which is like a really tiny amount of like a day or like 2 days or a week or whatever, they're like, oh, it's terrible. It failed. Like, no, that's not the thing. Like, you created it so that it can last, so that you can offer it over time. So, like, that's the perfect way to look at a product like this. So, good there, good there. And I was actually going to ask this about the positioning of the product in terms of your services.
Mhm.
So, it is great to be able to offer that to people who maybe can't afford you yet.
Mhm.
So, yeah, do you want to talk a little bit more about that, how it fits into your services? Like, if people buy that, could they still work with you later? And if so, like, what do their businesses look like, and do they have to go through a change then to be able to work with you? Like, how do the product and the services relate?
Yeah. So basically, the way I've structured things is like I try to give you tools for that are lower cost. Where like if you are I would have figured it out myself on my own time person, you can do that right without me. Here's the tool. Here's the self-led course. Like have a great time. Um, my services are about like if you would like some reassurance, if you'd like me to sort of like create the plan for you or do the thing for you, that's what my
Mhm.
services are, right? So there's this contract foundations course that comes with a template contract that I literally tell you how to customize. You can do that. Or if you don't want to do that, you can also hire me to write your customized contracts for your business
Mhm.
as well. And all my services are flat rate. So I have had people take my contracts foundations course and do a split, right? Like maybe for like the easier agreement, they'll do the template, but for stuff that they're not as sure about or like maybe struggling with, they'll hire me to do the contract drafting service. What most
Nice.
often happens is when people are first setting up their business and they just like have a ton of questions, they will take the contract foundations course as like a confidence marker, like, okay, I at least
Mhm.
have this basic legal thing down. And then they will also then book a legal strategy session with me and what I talk about in those is like usually you're at some sort of crossroads legally in your business, whether you're just starting out or like more seasoned, you're at a crossroads. And we talk through, like, I just talk through all the legal foundations in your business, like what's up to snuff, maybe what needs to be like reconsidered. And then I create an action plan for you. So a lot of times people will like do the contract foundations course and then they'll also want to do a legal strategy session. Or people will do a contract drafting service and then they'll also want to do a legal strategy session. So, like the services they're not designed to build on each other, but they're complementary to each other.
I love that everybody does it a different way. Some lead in, some are for totally separate groups of people, like the complementary, like that is nice. And then you can just let your customers know, like, hey, if you bought this product, you may need these services, or hey, these are my services. Oh, you're not ready. Here's the product. Like there, you can have conversations and you have offerings, not like you have 1,000 offerings and people are trying to wade through everything you have, but you're meeting, like you said, meeting people where they are in their businesses. And then, you can serve more people. And especially with the product, it's not a one-on-one. So it's, disconnected from your time. So many people can take it, and that's great.
Yeah. And I think, one of the big things is like my, my own personal value system requires me to tell people to be cost conscious, right? In setting
Hmm.
up their business. And
Hmm.
so, I'm like, if you can't afford this, like then start with this and do the best you can, right? There's
Hmm.
room for you in, this contract foundations course and with this template, there's room for you to like not get it exactly right and still have it be effective. Um,
Hmm.
and that matters when like you're, just starting out and like really trying to like pinch pennies, but also like bridge the like very big information gap that is like starting a business. That first like hill that you have to climb is pretty steep. Um, and getting the information you need can be expensive. So I try to
Hmm.
be really cost conscious of like, okay, does it make sense for you right now to like have pay for me to draft you these contracts, for this
Hmm.
amount of money? Or does it make sense for you to just start with like getting this foundation under your belt, having access to a template that you can like use and kind of work with, and then maybe we could
Yeah.
do the customized stuff later.
Hmm.
Um, One thing I want to add for people who are thinking
Yeah.
about digital courses is like you said something earlier about like wanting to get like a lot of people to buy the course in a short amount of time. And I think that comes from like usually platforms people are using to host these digital courses can be like expensive. And so people are trying to like get that cost covered. And one of the strategies that I took to sort of take the pressure off in that regard was I used a platform where you can host one course for free. Um,
Right.
and so I'm like,
Yeah.
I'll just keep one course. And once I get an audience where I'm like very comfortably paying, the monthly fee that would entitle me to
Hmm.
have more courses, then I will, expand these like digital products into more. But at
Hmm.
the moment, it's not costing me anything. I'm not like losing money because I have this digital product. And I think so often
Yeah.
people can put themselves in a situation where they're losing money with a digital product. And that's like
Hmm.
where the frustration can come from, where they're like, oh, I'm doing something wrong, or I should have had this audience first, or
Hmm.
whatever. And that pressure doesn't exist if you just like choose the free option. Yes, it's more limited.
Right.
Maybe the course isn't going to be like as beautiful or whatever the heck you want it to be. Like maybe it's not 100% perfect, but it's also not costing you anything as you like test
Hmm.
out what works and what doesn't and like continue to build like the audience for it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, being fiscally responsible, I think. And I'm hearing that more and more from guests on the show. Like, this is the third season, and, you know, it seems like more people are bringing that up and offering products at lower prices so that they can serve the people who can't afford them, and still nurture them and keep in contact. And maybe they will purchase their services, at some point, but maybe not, and that's fine. But it's important to more people, it seems, or maybe I'm just meeting these people now, to have an offering for people who can't afford it early on in their business or whatever. And I like that. And also, I had an episode recently talking about sales platforms and talked about that specific thing where, look at what you're already using. Can anything handle this? Because you're maybe already paying for it,
Mhm.
or you already know how to use it. A lot of people go on like, $100 a month on Thinkific or whatever. Because yes, there is that additional pressure, especially for a first product. There's so much pressure then to sell and sell a lot. And you might not have the audience. You might just, be figuring it out. You're early on in your digital product journey. So, yeah, having it might not be the option you stay with forever either. You can
Exactly.
switch platforms later. Like, there's tons and tons of options there. And I wish this would have been my experience when I first started because if I sort my I've been using the same invoicing software forever, and if I sort my transactions by expenses, very high, if in reverse order, very high at the top of the list. One of my first purchases was a pack of contracts, a pack of 5 contracts. It was $2,500. I've
Woo!
talked about this on the show before. And I used them for a hot minute, and I was scared to use them because I didn't know what they said, and I couldn't go back to that person without incurring additional costs, so I eventually did some other things with contracts. Um, you know, mm, but I wish that there would have been something like this, or maybe there was and I didn't know about it, so that I could have had, a better journey, right?
Mhm.
A more inexpensive journey, a more confident journey. Like, because the things that I did after that too, like I went to like a totally free contract, which probably did nothing, and then eventually I kind of worked it out. But like I just it would have been nice if it had looked different. And it's great that it can look different for other people now because there are things like this. So yay.
Yes. Yeah. For anyone listening, like, do not buy a pack of template contracts for $2,500. Don't do it. And the reason I want to say that is like because drafting and reviewing contracts is a basic function of any business lawyer. Like, it's the most basic thing that you need to be able to do. And, like, quite frankly, you should be able to do. Like, for the most needs of small business owners, you should be able to draft a contract like that, like in your sleep. And so
Mhm.
price gouging people who are small business owners for this information, to me anyway, is like feels in like the marrow of my bones, like wildly unethical.
I
Because
could have done so much more with that money, like,
exactly,
and
exactly.
but also
Like
I didn't understand them. If I understood them,
it
that
would
would
be
have been
different.
one thing.
Yes.
If I still use them to this day, also another story altogether. However, as it went, mm,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And
not the
I
best.
I just am always I'm never not side eyeing that kind of pricing because I'm like, what is happening over there? I lean towards like we are in price gouging territory for people who every dollar matters. And for me
Mhm.
personally, I just like I'm a huge advocate of building like local, sustainable, and small economies. And so I
Mhm.
fundamentally am like, you are like working against this very important thing
Yes.
about how we build community now.
Mhm.
So as you can tell, like it makes me really mad.
Yeah. Yeah. So, do you want to share with us your advice for people who are creating their first product? So, it could have been something maybe you already mentioned, or maybe not something you wish you would have done, or you're glad you did. So, people are out there, they want to create products and they're listening to this podcast and they want to know, what is your advice for them to create their first product?
I would say two things. The first thing is to keep it as simple as possible. We are not writing treatises for the internet, like you said earlier. Like the internet exists. Like if someone wants to learn one everything there is to know about a topic, they can like sit on the internet for hours. They can go to their local library. Like that is not what the purpose of a digital product or course is. And so, simple. What is a simple problem that you can provide a simple solution to? And when you think you've simplified it, like take it through another round of simplification. Because part of it is like the more complicated it is, the more you're going to like hype it up in here of like, how am I ever going to accomplish this? The
Hmm.
simpler
Yeah,
it
that
is
makes sense.
like, the simpler it is, and the easier it's gonna be to, like, get started and then actually finish it. Like, the
Hmm.
my courses that exist currently is something that I outlined in a day and something that I videoed over 2 or 3 days. I didn't do a lot of tape. I didn't try to make a perfect
Hmm.
product. I just tried to make a product.
Hmm.
So keep it
Yeah.
simple and then like free yourself from the requirement of perfection. Like, so I
Hmm.
wouldn't say like you need to go out and like buy all these fancy like cameras and whatever. Again, like let the product like make the money for those equipment purchases later if that's something that's
Hmm.
important to you. um, but do the bare minimum to get a course like out into the world.
Hmm.
Whatever
Yeah, I
that
love
looks
that. I
like.
love that.
And like consistently ask yourself, like, is this a bare minimum or is there somewhere low? Like, is the bare minimum lower than where I'm currently at? Like, how
Yes.
bare can I
Hmm.
make this and have it be
Hmm.
effective is actually an interesting way to make a really good product.
Yeah, yeah. And I've had people on the show before who, one in particular, very early on, he said his course had the bells and whistles, had bells and whistles, which I thought was really funny
Yeah.
because it's just so over the top. People don't need or want all of those features. So what is the purpose of you spending the time and effort and money and energy putting that in there when that is not what is actually important? What is actually important is solving a problem for someone and helping them get from A to B. That's the important part.
Yeah, and I think, increasingly with the way that search algorithms already work and the way that they are looking like they're going to shift as like AI becomes more integrated into the way people look for products online, it's going to be increasingly important that it's like problem solution
Mhm.
for the way
Yeah.
people search.
Mhm.
And the way people like find products and things that they need on the internet. And so the more you are like bare minimum, like less fluff, more clear about like product solution, the better it's going to do.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. Totally agree, totally agree. And if not, then you didn't spend so much time. Do you know what I mean? If you create
Exactly.
something very small that doesn't quite work, at least you didn't spend 3 years on it.
Yes.
You could pivot or you could redo it or do another one, like, you haven't invested so much of yourselves, like, I think is super common. It's like, "I'm gonna make the greatest course, the biggest course of all time." Like, "No, no, no, don't do that."
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
my
I
that's my
agree with
preach here.
that. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Can you tell us where we can find you online?
Sure. So my website is theeverydaylawyer.co. And then I am on Instagram and I'm on Threads and it's the underscore everyday underscore lawyer.
Thank you so much for being on today. I think the guests are going to find this very, very valuable, and I'm sure relate to it 100%.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me.
Hey, thanks for listening. I'd love to continue the conversation in your inbox. Email subscribe to hey@yfdp.show or sign up in the show notes to get bi-monthly emails about how you can create, launch, and market your first digital product. Can't wait to see you there.